feel like Kobe in the fourth quarter.
This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast. We are brought to you by Prize Picks, coming at you Thursday morning. It's March 27th, and the Wolves, they're in the midst of a weird stretch where they only play one game in 6 days. Today is their third night off in a row as we record this, before they play Phoenix on Friday night and then Detroit on Sunday. Every team in the league can use a break like this, right? This is helpful to get that rest, but something about this one feels a little funky, I think, for the Wolves, given that they've lost 3 of their last 4 leading up to this in an unconvincing fashion, and in a time that they really needed to win to kind of push themselves up the standings as they've needed to. I think a good chunk of the fan base has lost a little bit of faith, but not Britt Robson. Britt wrote his column this week. Quote, reasons to be optimistic about this team in the upcoming playoffs. You put on some rose-colored glasses, man. You zagged. I liked it. We'll get into, I guess the specific elements that you laid out there, but just in general, what made you write this one?
Well, I think what made me write this one is a backlash against what happens, and I'm guilty of it myself. I mean, I spent the first part of the column essentially talking about the fact that during Kevin Garnett's prime, they went to the playoffs 8 straight seasons. And since Ant and Finch have been here together, they have had 3 straight seasons in the playoffs, and more than likely will be a 4th. They have to essentially lose 2 play-in games is what it's looking like. It would have to happen. So you take those 8 seasons with KG and the soon-to-be 4 seasons with Ant and Finch as playoff appearances. Those other 24 seasons of franchise history, they made the playoffs once, and that was as an 8th seed under Tom Thibodeau. So, yes, they have been disappointing this season. Yes, they lose in ways that they bait and switch your hopes. They basically hook you in saying, wow, this team is really coming together. And look there's really a lot of talent. And not only is there a lot of talent, but there's these new young people that are filling in really interesting ways. And Jaden McDaniels is expanding his game. And, you start to pick up on these things. And then you see longest winning streak in 20 years. And then, Indiana comes in and they have nobody. They don't have their top 5, 6 guys. And they just clearly wanted the game more. They outplayed them. And then right after that, you would think that, all right, they had their letdown. They can make it a blip on the screen and now win 9 out of 10 rather than have a 2-game losing streak against a terrible team, and they don't. So those 2 losses back to back, I really think, for me anyway, it reminded me that this team lacks some real integrity in terms of doing what needs to be done. But you got to balance that against what is out there, what the reality is. If you want your emotions to yo-yo between, oh, they're going to be great, they're doing it, or, oh, they suck. What I thought I'd do is take a fairly honest appraisal of what does this team's postseason chances look like. And no, they're not favorite, and they're not in a position where somebody would say they're even going to be in the finals or maybe even past the first round. But there's some really intriguing aspects to this team that make them a dangerous foe, the classic cliche, the team nobody wants to face or whatever. They have the ability to put it together in different ways, and I just thought I'd explore some of those ways in which the Wolves are a dangerous postseason team. Whether they fulfill that remains to be seen.
Yeah, I think the most obvious one, but also the most potent one, would be Ant, right? Postseason Ant, what he's been since he first went to the playoffs as a 21-year-old in that Memphis series, as you kind of detailed in the playoffs. I think unsurprising to everybody who watches Ant all the time and does see him during the regular season. Notice his game elevate when he's playing against a Steph Curry or a Kevin Durant or a worthy foe, right? And the playoffs bring that every time, and it should be. I think the thing that you're highlighting here, and I agree with it, is it should be an assumption that Anthony Edwards at 23 years old in the playoffs, when they get there in a couple weeks, will elevate his game off of what it's been during the regular season, because he's done that to a noticeable, consistent too. It's not like just like a good game or a couple of good games. There's an elevation of the overall production, and I think like the bankability of it, right?
Exactly. And yeah, it's a little wonkier this year because it isn't the same personnel. There's, I think, a more jarring. DiVincenzo and Randle are fairly jarring additions because of what they have done to the other players. It changes the way Gobert plays. It changes the way Conley plays. But I also think that they have talent in and of themselves that they're bringing to the table. It remains a volatile mixture, but if Ant does what Ant does and those ingredients coalesce, then that is the best case scenario. I mean, that is a team that will really be, let's face it, the reason people are souring on the Wolves this season is because of their play against inferior teams. It's not their play against superior teams or teams that are equal to them. They have actually played those teams tough. And Ant has always been somebody, whether it's international play or whether it's in the postseason as a kid, going against Memphis, he had 13 points and 3 assists in his first quarter of the playoffs ever, and wound up with 36 points and 6 times in that very first game. And if you look, I went to Basketball Reference where they, collate for you regular season and playoffs. He's had like 372 regular season games and only 27 playoff games. But the difference is extraordinary. There isn't a stat on the board where he's not better. The only thing that is lower instead of higher in his playoff resume is turnovers. He doesn't turn the ball over as much, which is also a good thing. I mean, it literally is nothing he doesn't do. And that doesn't measure what he does on defense. You and I and Jason and other people, a lot of people who, watch this game really carefully from good seats most of the year, can see that it is aggravating, and you have to give him space, and you have to make all kinds of, what amounts to excuses for him, but they're legitimate excuses, that Ant takes plays off or has his attention lag, and that inability to get back and match up in time and transition, or not pick up his man, instead pick up another man, or get a little casual with the ball, or decide he's going to be tunnel vision with the shot selection and ignore open teammates. All of those things, I think, are the product of Ant. Not to damn him this much, but he's bored with what's happening relative to, he's got 82 games. Here we go. When he has something in front of him that is meaningful on both ends of the court, he plays to the best of his ability at all times. And Ant, to the best of his ability at all times, is a legitimate ace, ace in the hole that you have as a team.
I think like where my head would go is like a counter, right? Of like, okay, well then how could it not? How could Ant maybe not elevate his stats from the regular season to the postseason? And you would go, okay, well the opponent would be even more intentional about trying to take him away, maybe even more this season when the number 2 option is Julius Randle versus it being Karl-Anthony Towns in the past. So part of my head goes to, okay, well, he's going to get more attention. But then I think back to the first round series against Phoenix, and I go, is it possible to get more attention than he got in? I mean, that was crazy, right? We talked about that all the time. Just the jamming double gap help. Like if you want to go right, okay, Grayson Allen is there in the gap on the right side, and then Bradley Beal sitting in on the left side. Like they were trying to take away his driving lanes there, and it forced him to be more of a playmaker. Obviously we really saw Denver kind of load up in the playoffs against him. That was a little bit more on the backside, right? Like they would load up the defender, so there'd always be someone for him at the rim, even if it was less so in the gap. And so I go, yeah, like these teams, objective number one against in the game plan has been slowing Ant. What I think is interesting about Denver and Phoenix in particular, and the only two teams Ant has ever beaten, right, is that neither of those teams had anybody to just contain him in the primary matchup. You know what I'm saying?
Lou Dort.
Yeah, right. Like if Phoenix had Lou Dort on him, and then they had gap, right? Or they're doing, you know, that's a different
Well,
thing.
and Memphis used that really well with the Wells, and then they backed up with, you know, guys like Jaylen, Triple J. And so there are ways to do that. And to your point, like what are the counters? What are the counter arguments? Because this wasn't reasons to be optimistic.
Yeah.
But if I were to argue against the theme of my column, I would say that the roles, in terms of real pecking order roles, remain somewhat contentious on this team.
Sure.
I think Julius Randle wants a share of this playoff burden. I think Dante DiVincenzo will take a share of this playoff burden. I think ignoring Mike Conley, who we'll talk about in a minute, his role in this playoff burden, especially as it relates to Rudy, would be a mistake. And I think that Jaden McDaniels is kind of a secret weapon here on that end. So I do think that you could have too many cooks in the kitchen if Ant is being gang guarded. There'll be a lot of people who see opportunity. And I have noticed as we've had this time off, I've been able to look over some games. Julius Randle is really kind of a barometer right now. If he is really playing the right way and has the momentum of teammates hitting some shots of his early, and he's a little bit more engaged on defense, this team is really good. And when he reverts to some of his old habits of, waiting or just taking on three defenders from the top of the key to the rim, or crab dribbling down and waiting and then spinning. And it looks like a great play. And I know Finch endorses it all the time. But I continue to think that if Randle has drawn three defenders and kicks it out to you with 2 seconds on the clock or 3 seconds on the clock, it's kind of like Julius Randle has created the play for you. Now it's up to you to ratify Julius Randle. There is not that sense of teamwork as much. Yes, he's sharing the ball and so on and so forth, but it's a different kind of teamwork than swing, swing, swing. Fourth guy is open. Right. Everybody touches it. It's just a better teamwork style of play. And when Randle is part of that, more than part of being that heliocentric version of himself, it makes a huge difference. And so that's what I would worry about. If Ant is kind of neutralized, who notices that and takes up the cudgel, and how do they do it?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly it. And I think that goes back to like the opponents, right? As you kind of laid out in the piece, It's like, if we're looking at it today on Thursday, you're looking at your first round playoff series being against the 1, 2, or 3 seed. And, 3 seed is Denver, right? And you probably, I don't know, see how they would match up Christian Brown or Aaron Gordon on Ant. Maybe in both of those situations, it doesn't force the Wolves to get away from Ant at all, because I do think Ant, at least with Brown, I think we know pretty well that he'll be able to take that. And if they do opt to put Aaron Gordon on him, then okay, then that's a time for a not that Ant wouldn't be able to score on Aaron Gordon, but well, if Aaron Gordon's on Ant, then who's on Julius Randle, right? And that's another option there. Same thing if you get the 2-7 and it's the Rockets, there's going to be a better than Christian Brown level defender guarding Ant, and you're going to need another lever. You're going to definitely need that against Oklahoma City, right? And that would be the one I'm most concerned about, the Randle specific lever,
Right.
given how I've seen how that looks. But the point is I do think in a playoff matchup, they are going this season, they're going to need that second lever more, just the way that they guard them, the quality of what the defensive opponent is likely to be in the playoffs, and whether that's, I mean, Randle, let's talk about him a little bit later. I think some of it is like the smaller level levers too, which you laid out. Jaden McDaniels, what we've seen from him in the last 30 games. Mike Conley, what we've seen of him from the last 30 games once he's gotten a little bit more healthy. I know there's the Randle lever out there, but with Conley and McDaniels, how can they help in this?
Well, I think they can help because they have adjusted in ways that are extremely helpful to the overall team framework. Mm-hmm. For Conley, that means reducing his role.
Yeah.
Mike Conley has realized, and it's an incredibly generous pro move that has not been given enough credit. Mike Conley used to run half-court offenses. He did it for 17 fucking years. I mean, that's a long time to be like one of the guys, and it's what he does. If anybody has a right to be jealous about their role, it's Mike Conley. He was brought here specifically to do that. He was signed, extended specifically to continue that. And the imposition of Randle and Ant's further growth has stunted that and has forced him to recalibrate at precisely the time he was working through a chronic wrist injury, and for whatever reason, his short game was abandoned him even more than usual. So Conley figured it out. Yeah. Conley goes in. He used to, belittle. I got to go from one corner to the next and go stand in the corner, or whatever. Well, he moves without the ball a lot. He doesn't get the ball a lot, but when he gets the ball, he doesn't basically say, okay, now I'm the point guard. He says, all right, now it's time to keep moving the ball, or, hey, I've got an open shot. But what he has done, his usage is the lowest of his career, and yet he is making a phenomenal percentage of his three-pointers.
Yeah, these numbers.
I mean, January and February, 24 games, he made 43.1% of his threes, and in March, that's up to 60%. He's made 21 of 35 threes.
We just pause right there. I mean, 60% on threes. That's an
effective field goal percentage of 90.
Okay, go ahead.
And meanwhile, I mean, in January and February, he had 130 assists and 20 turnovers. That's a 6.5 to 1 ratio, assist to turnover ratio. For his season, he's 4.3 to 1. Just superb numbers, typical Mike Conley numbers, but he is doing it in a role that is not as familiar to him. Now, legitimate criticisms can be made about Conley's defense. He has been isolated. Coaches have figured out big wings will post him up. That is much less of a problem with Gobert on the floor. And now that Gobert is healthy and Finch is wisely starting Conley alongside Gobert to just, if you notice, coaches have game plans, and it's like, why don't they execute that game plan when the rotations happen? And then we have this thing. It's weird that doesn't happen more often. I would say if Gobert's not on the floor and Conley is, why don't you give those big win posted things then? Because it's vulnerable again. But it doesn't seem to happen as much. Who knows why? Yeah. And it may just be that simple as they say, well, that's not the game plan because we knew Rudy would be out there. But it is a weakness, and in the playoffs, you seize upon matchup weaknesses. So the counter to my claim that Mike Conley, what I say is a rested and restive Mike Conley, is he can still be targeted on defense unless you're careful and intentional about denying that. Mm-hmm. But in the meantime, his adjustment and the way he can be a threat, there's always the Rudy Mike pick and roll that it isn't like you have to. The reintegration will not be a slow process. They know how to do it in their sleep. You could go to it if things are, going south in some ways. I think Houston as a team in particular that can work on, because they're so active on defense and they don't have a real classic big on that role for Rudy. So, that would be an example of when maybe you could use Mike and Rudy on the pick and roll. But the point being, Mike Conley has a lesser role on this team, and what he has done is maximize that lesser role, and that's exactly what you want from your, veteran leader, to see what is needed and then do it. And also, he's hungry. He's in his next to last year of his career probably, and he hasn't had a ring yet. Mm-hmm. As for McDaniels, and I'll be much, much briefer, McDaniels used to be the place where people would hide people. Opponents would say, all right, we'll stick either our best scorer and worst defender or a guy we want to roam, like Rudy gets off Gobert.
I mean, Halliburton did this in the last. They put Halliburton on him in the last game. Yeah,
exactly. Jaden he can burn that.
I agree. That's changed.
And that is a big, big difference. That gives the Wolves so much more flexibility than they had before. So anyway, I talked for 5 minutes straight. Go for it.
No. It's I always call it the giddy thing, right? Because we talked about that before, and it's like, I mean, and the Wolves won't be alone in this, where you got your 30-something% 3-point shooter that you have out there for other reasons of things they're great at, as Giddey was and is certainly showing in Chicago recently. If you watch the Bulls recently, they're fun. But it's the shortcoming area that I think, particularly within the starting lineup, you can teams will adjust their defenses to try to exploit that. And that will be a question once we come around to playoff previews. How do teams guard McDaniels and how is he able to handle it? But I'm with you 100% that his skill set and in practice, what we've seen on the floor, he's been able to not be a Giddey in that way and prove that that's been a bad idea and force teams consistently throughout the season to change that a little bit.
At the very least, he really raises the rebounding, and that is something the Wolves desperately need on the defensive glass and offensive glass, but especially on defense, they need to clear the board.
And that is new. That is new from Jaden McDaniels within the recent 30 games that he's played. Grab our first break here, then we'll keep going. Want to let you all know that the Timberwolves are hosting a live watch party at Treasure Island Resort and Casino for the Wolves-Sixers game at 6 p.m. on April 5th. They're going to have the whole deal there. Crunch. Pooh Richardson's going to be there. But me and Kyle will be there as well. We're doing a live show at 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. when the game starts. We'd love if you came early, an hour before the game, hung out with us, listen to us do a live show, and then we'll all be there watching the Wolves game from 6 to 8:30 or wherever that goes. You can get a hotel for the night if you'd like to stay. That's what Kyle and I and Cooper will be doing. But we'd love if you came down to Treasure Island on April 5th for the live show, and then live show, it starts at 5 p.m. and then the watch party, which will start at 6 o'clock. Today's show is also brought to you by Prize Picks. I was just looking at it this morning. I was like, all right, what game am I going to watch? Thunder Grizzlies tonight. No, I was clicking through there. No Ja Morant. That kind of sucks in that game. But that made me go, all right, let's get Scottie Pippen Jr. more than 11.5 points. They use him like Ja when Ja doesn't play, which happens a lot. So I was like, I feel good about that. I think his recent scoring numbers, what is it here? He scored 16, 15, 18, 11 in the last 4 games. Those are all games that Morant has been out for. I think Pippen is likely to have more than 11.5 points tonight. And then I did Chet Holmgren less than 17.5. I think the Jaren Jackson Jr., Chet Holmgren matchup will be interesting there. Obviously, a bunch of NCAA tournament stuff that Prize Pick has going on this week and weekend as well. But these were 2 that I liked for tonight's slate of NBA games. PrizePicks.com, Prize Picks app. If you don't have an account, sign up with the promo code Dane. They'll put $50 in your account when you make your first $5 lineup. Just to kind of keep going on with the playoffs a little bit. This wasn't specific to your column and what you wrote about the playoffs, but I was thinking yesterday before I read your thing, just some things that I wanted to talk about related to the playoffs. And
Sure.
And I know we talked about Edwards and Randle a little bit, but I think just a huge question is, man, like, is the Edwards and Randle pairing ready to win a playoff series?
Very
and
good.
you know what I mean? And just
I think that is an excellent point. And to be honest with you, I foolishly said, well, if I need more to copy, which never happens, but I thought, I was going to have like 3 or 4 things, reasons for optimism, and one X factor. Yeah. And my X factor was going to be the Randle combination. So I'm really glad you picked up on that, because it really is. I mean, you've talked about baton passing. That, I think, puts a pretty face on it. I think baton grabbing might be another way to say it. But, I mean, I really do think that they both legitimately respect what the other can do. Mm-hmm. But in the heat of a game, their self-belief is going to take over.
They get a little grabby. They get a little grabby for the baton. Yeah. But it's like, it goes back to the Ant part of it. We're talking about of how good he's consistently been in the playoffs and why that's bankable. And so I was thinking, this is the rose-colored glasses version of it, is it's like, well, how good offensively does Ant need his number 2 to be? It shouldn't be that high of a bar. And I do think it's reasonable to be like, all right, collectively of high volume, high impact, difficult scoring, I think it's reasonable to say that Edwards and Randle can give you enough offensively, to be able to win at a high level in the playoffs. Because I don't think it needs to be, Julius Randle doesn't need to be incredible on volume. You don't need 40-point, 35-point games from him. You need those two in the aggregate to be better than Shea or Luka or whatever it might be. And those guys, those players, Shea and Luka and the other, elite players in the West, are going to be more efficient with their production than Ant is. I think the question becomes, if you put Ant and Randle together and you're getting the best versions of themselves, okay, now that's an overall greater volume than if we put Shea at 35% usage. Okay, well, if Ant's at 32% usage and Julius is at 25, okay, that's 57% usage, like whatever, that's a big chunk. If you get big, efficient, effective play from those two, that might be able to be more than the super duper best players in the Western Conference, and maybe better than Shea plus J-Dub, or it's hard to say Luka plus LeBron, but like that's kind of what the bar is here. And I don't think it's ridiculous if we focus on the offensive side of the ball to say that they could potentially meet that requirement on the offensive side of the ball. And then they do have the defenders behind them. They have Rudy Gobert. They have Jaden McDaniels. They have Jaylen Clark. They have Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Dante DiVincenzo. On paper, I don't think it's crazy to say that the Wolves will have enough offense in the playoffs, provided they get legitimately good production consistently from Edwards and Randle. The problem is, during the regular season, we do not see that happen consistently. And it goes back then to the spot we're at, where it's like, well, can we expect it to be more consistent in the playoffs because it's the playoffs, which we've seen Ant individually do every time?
I think a really fascinating aspect of this is that Anthony Edwards currently has a 3-point percentage in 27 playoff games of 39-1. That's before he entered this new rocket ship this season.
Yeah.
And so there is a possibility, if we think that Ant elevates his game, if Ant elevates his game from outside, then you are looking at a potentially really good offense. If Ant is hitting like 42% of his threes in a first round series, then and then you've got DiVincenzo, you've got Nas. I think I'm much more confident of DiVincenzo being a playoff accurate shooter than Nas right now. Nas, I think, really has to prove himself in the clutch, but DiVincenzo has proven himself, and he's got a lot of confidence, and he can space the floor. And there are times when Finch has really liked that Ant DiVincenzo backcourt. I think we'll see more of that in the playoffs. And I also think Conley, that's when Conley and Rudy and Randle, for that matter, can kind of fill in the gaps. But I think if you have DiVincenzo and Ant out there, Ant engaged on defense and DiVincenzo being his usual tough-nosed defense, you have the capability of a chaos-inducing, transition-heavy, three-point-centric offense, and also a pretty good defensive team. And that's the kind of thing that beats even good teams.
Right.
And so I can really see if Ant is hitting his threes, and Randle, in my opinion, needs to have a little Mike Conley in him and pick his spots and further the ball, keep the river moving when he doesn't have what he has. That will be a key. And I really think the DiVincenzo...
I mean, dude, they're going to win. They're going to win if he does that. If Ant shoots 40% on volume from three and Julius is productive in the ways that we've seen him be efficiently productive during the season, of an individual scorer in isolation and a playmaker when he draws a crowd, that's going to work. If you put those two
really
things
good. Well, you can't say they're going to win because they're going to play some really good teams, but it'll be a lot of fun.
I think you win. I think you win if you get Ant at 40% clip on shooting 10 plus a game, and you get the best versions of Julius as a 2-point player. But as what he does in that 14-foot range, if he does those, I think that's enough, because I do believe in the defense. Like, me and Jace were talking about it yesterday, and he was just like, or the other day, and he was just at me. He's like, "No, this team's gonna be good in the playoffs." Like, I do think that should be the assumption. It's certainly a much safer assumption than this connection where I'm betting on right here, or suggesting right now, of Ant doing this while Julius does that.
Yes, exactly.
I just think, as for a fan, that's why you should have reasons for optimism going to a playoff series, maybe more than you typically would for a 7 or 8 seed. And I don't think this is just us like polishing the turd of a 7th and 8th seed. It's legitimate things that we've seen that don't have happened in conjunction rarely over the course of this season, but they have happened at times. And it's not ridiculous to say that Randle could do that. And Ant, like you said, he was already doing that from the 3-point range element before he improved his 3-point shot. Like, I don't know. I think if you get the both of them, they're dangerous. I legitimately do.
And I actually think, I know you focus on Randle, and it correctly so, because he will be, in the pecking order, he's the guy who takes the second half of the carrying that's lying around, But essentially, DiVincenzo being able to, if Ant is drawing people to the perimeter and DiVincenzo is making shots from 27 feet, I mean, that is going to be a nightmare for opposing defenses. And DiVincenzo, I saw him with the Lakers the Knicks last season in the playoffs. And that dude, when he's on a heater and he feels it, plus the way he can disrupt people in transition on defense, he has the potential also to be a real disruptor. I wanted to give Conley his flowers in this column, and I do believe McDaniels as somebody you cannot rest your defense on are bigger factors. But I think if DiVincenzo finds that postseason groove he's been in a couple of times in his career, that, again, is another reason why this team gets very dangerous.
I do think Ant and Julius set that up, though.
Yeah, that could be.
I think those things.
I mean, I give you credit. Well, let's face it. We're going to find out, because Randle is not going to be a shrinking violet here. I mean, Randle will have to fail to fall back to a level that makes him a kind of a Mike Conley factor. And I think that I just hope that he has it together enough to understand, not to say, not to go to the well saying, well, this time will be different. Right. That's what I worry about. But and then it's up to the coach. Finch has been in his corner all season, and that is another fascinating subplot. Quite frankly, shades of Finch and D'Lo in that first round against Memphis.
Sure.
Eventually it just was, okay, got to throw in the towel here.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying it's going to happen to Julius Randle, but I think the dynamic is not that dissimilar. You've got a guy who, if he's able to temporarily fit, is a huge boost, but doesn't automatically fit. And therefore, if you conclude that he's not fitting and you got a fabric beyond him, you excise him,
Did you rewatch the Pacers game from Monday or whenever?
Yeah.
But did you rewatch it? I didn't bring this up enough, I think, when Jason and I did it, but I was rewatching that game yesterday. And the lack of Randle effort and activity at the beginning of that game was extremely jarring to me.
Yeah.
Because I thought we were past that.
Right.
And I found that to be extremely disappointing because it was such a rebellion by him against what obviously the game plan was. It's the Indiana Pacers. And he just played them a couple days before. You knew they were going to run, and the amount of plays where he was doing that thing where the Wolves take a shot and then the first 3 steps are like long walking strides back.
Right.
And I was like, damn, Julius, against the Pacers,
Right.
and it's that there's been something just over as things has gotten a little bit worse recently, last 10 days or so since the winning streak, where it's like, what slipped away with Randle? Because so much of the winning streak, right? It was they won 13 games in a row with Randle played, and it was just this activity and speed of it. It doesn't make sense to me why Randle was like that on Monday and has been like that in the last couple games, and it leads to us me or anybody watching that going back to the body language. So what is this? Why is it that way? And he looks like a malcontent when he's playing that way, and I don't think he is, Britt. I don't think he's actually as discontented as it looks sometimes. I think at the beginning of the year he was.
Right.
It's just, I understand this is making excuses, but I feel like there's something else going on with him over the past couple of weeks.
Right.
Or something. And the most optimistic one I can point to is he just had a kid. You know what I'm saying? And there's just he's talked it to us, and people haven't liked when we brought this up about this team being tired recently. And that's fair. The season's on the line. It sucks when they're looking tired. You're not having that effort. But I wonder, and if we're willing to give Randle some grace or look for a reason that this won't happen from Randle in a month when they're playing in the playoffs, I hope it's the kid thing. Because other than that, it just doesn't make sense. And they can't afford it because they already have young players. They already struggled to get back as a whole, and some of that stuff. I am holding out some hope that Julius Randle is going to be able to have the effort of the player he was consistently during that stretch, though it's going to be against harder teams. And can you hold that there? It just really stood out to me rewatching that game, and particularly in the first, just go back,
especially early, right?
Just if your listeners go watch literally the first 4 minutes of the game and spotlight Randle is weird. It's disappointing. Just disappointing. Yeah.
2 things. When I did my Tim Connolly piece, he specifically said, people think that my job is about making trades. He said the biggest part of my job is keeping tabs on our players, and so much of what I do is knowing when something is going on with them in their personal life behind the scenes. And that is as much of my job as anything. And that's kind of what you're alluding to. And that is certainly a possibility. We don't know. It could be, that, his car was stolen, or it could be that, somebody is threatening his father. You don't know.
It also could just be, to be fair, we're doing the excuses thing here. It could just be that nope, it was bad body language, and that's a part of who Julius Randle is.
But the other thing I want to say is, and I do not want this to be amplified out of context. This is just a thing it's not an elephant in the room, but it's something in the room that needs to be acknowledged. He has a player option next year. I'm sure he wants more than 1 year out of that. I think he wants a short extension at worst. He wants the Rudy deal that, like 90 for 3 or something. Mm-hmm. If he's not going to get a raise, something like that. And maybe it's been one of the things, and I have no information on any of this. Is all speculation, and I do not want it exaggerated. But Finch and he have had a great relationship all year, and I'm sure he knows that the coach has had faith in him. Finch has said he's been a joy to coach the entire time, and it may be that he convinced himself that I've made myself so useful to this team that I'm going to be able to stay with this team for a longer period of time. And right around now is when you want to have those conversations. You don't want to have them in the middle of the playoffs, and you don't want to have them in the postseason. You want to be able to start to figure things out. And maybe he got some bad news on that end.
Yeah, no, again, specifically if you highlight for the beginning, it just looks like it. And it was just in a disappointing, the beginning of the Indiana game, given how fast they played, given that you knew that that's what it was going to be, because that's how they beat you a couple days before. Yeah, it was, as someone who I think has tried to keep an open mind to what Julius Randle can be at his ceiling and has been ratified by that at times. Yeah. It just made that, it made that tougher to stomach and was a reminder that I think that I was saying, I think they can win if Ant shoots 40% and Julius is doing his thing. It just served as a reminder is they're going to lose every game in the playoffs. I think that you get that version of Randle, or you get the versions of Edwards that we've been seeing here recently.
And I could also say that I think that when Randle originally came back, Gobert wasn't back yet. Mm-hmm. And I think that Nas and Randle, Julius likes to play that way better.
Sure.
I mean, Gobert obviously helps him a ton on defense, but on offense, gets in his space. And also Rudy is a scold. It's one of his advantages. He improves his defense, the team's defense, by pointing things out constantly by deed and in word. Right. And if Randle is not executing on defense, maybe it was the previous game, before the New Orleans blowout, but the game where they lost to New Orleans, where, Zion was chewing everybody up and then hitting baseline cutters. And the way they tried to gang guard Zion was totally inept. Maybe it was something between Rudy and Gobert about that. I mean, we don't know any of the reasons, but I agree with you. I noticed it, frankly, and filed it, but did not highlight it to the extent you were doing here. But I don't disagree with you that under the circumstances, the context, we're no longer at the beginning of the feeling out process is over. And this is all, these are like pre-playoff table settings. Right. And if you are setting the table with dirty forks, then it's a bad time to do it. And the Pacers, you're right, are, if he wanted to send a message of, hey, this is what could happen to you, you got a nice team here, I wouldn't want to break it.
Yeah, it's I think whatever, I don't even know what to name that we're talking about. It just
it's lassitude. It's actually what Ant does too much time. Well, I mean, and not that Ant does it so egregiously. And Ant obviously has so much on his plate that I give Ant a lot of slack because, first of all, he's a superstar. And if you really believe that superstars should be treated like everybody else in the NBA, then you should go watch a different sport, because it can't be that way. They can be, he gets coached hard by Finch, and he does have ways of improvement. But one of the reasons why we are optimistic about the postseason is because we know that we'll get 100% of Anthony Edwards.
Right.
That isn't damning him, but it can be seen as an acknowledgement that you do not get 100% Ant during the 82 regular season games. You don't. And that's the way it works.
Yeah. There's a volatility to both of them. I do think with Randle, just what I've learned over like the course of the season is there can be like swift changes in the slope, right? Where I think back to Finch often talks about the turning point for Julius Randle this season being that game in New York against the Knicks. And if you remember the first game against the Knicks at the beginning of the season, Julius Randle has like 15 points in the first quarter, and it was a lot of like personal triumph, going to beat the Knicks in that way, and they lose that game by 1 million.
Right.
The Wolves do. And then the New York game was like, it was one of the first times we really saw this, I call it the 14-point triple-double version of Julius Randle. We've seen that over the course of time. And he played that way against the Knicks. I think the Knicks game, and shout out to Andrew Carlson, who covers the Wolves for Canis Supers. Me and him were talking about this a little bit. But what's interesting to me about it shifting at that Knicks game is the game before was 2 nights prior to the game at Madison Square Garden in New York was against the Warriors at home. It's the game that Dante DiVincenzo hurt his toe. Randle didn't close the game. And I remember this. I'm not sure if you were there, but like Randle was on his way out of the locker room before we even got in there, which is just for people like that's really fast.
Right.
And I remember he was walking out of the locker room, and Buddy Hield was walking down the hallway the other way, and Julius is storming out of there. He's mad. He's frustrated about that game. He didn't close, whatever. And Buddy Hield says to him, he goes, "Oh, I know that look." As he's going by Randle the other way. And I was like, and to me in the moment, I was like, is this the point? This is like mid-January. I'm like, is this all, did they try and it's all sort of slipping away? But 48 hours later, they play that game in New York, and Julius Randle, to the slope changing. It was like right back up. And it was that Knicks game. And then they're kind of rolling the whole last 2 weeks of January. Randle's playing his best basketball of the year until he gets hurt on January 29th against Utah that game. And I wrote that down when I was venting in my notes here about what I saw from Randle in that Pacers game is sometimes the body language and the activity from him is just so bipolar, game to game. And I say that in this sense, in a positive way of like, just because Randle played that way on Monday night doesn't mean he's going to play that way on Friday. And I actually think the safer bet is that he plays an activated version of himself against Phoenix, and we get a good game, because that's been his pattern at the lowest points, the most frustrating to the eye test points of the season. The next game, he's bounced back in a real way. So I'll be curious. Plus, you get the 3 days off before this Phoenix game. Are you stewing?
And look at that front line. Look at that front line.
Yeah.
I mean, Phoenix's front line. The bloom is kind of coming off the rose for Nick Richards, and I mean they're playing well. They're playing well, but I don't think that front court defense is a virtue of that team. And so you have and Randle, that's red meat for Randle. I think that I expect him to have a good game tomorrow night. I do, but. The point is that he could always pull out that bad card and play it, and that makes a person untrustworthy, a player untrustworthy. And Randle has always been a polarizing player. Not always, but certainly during his Lakers and Knicks tenure, more his Knicks tenure than his Lakers tenure. But he was somebody who, on the one hand, re-elevated the Knicks franchise. On the other hand, kind of was accused of getting in the way and kind of,
Mm-hmm.
Being the kind of malign force that, we're hoping doesn't happen with this Timberwolves team.
Mm-hmm.
But he is one of those guys that a lot of people swear by him and a lot of people swear at him. And that's just, the situation. And it's because he'll give you that body language that you're talking about and that look that Buddy Hield sees. And then you will also have the guy who talks to us in barely over a whisper after a triple-double in a game and just smiling and just being this gentle giant. And you say, man, what a great asset to have around. And that's the guy Chris Finch sees all the time. That's the guy that Chris Finch has been devoting a tremendous amount of his energy and reputation toward maximizing. And that, again, makes a fascinating subplot, I think, for this playoffs. So, and what always complicates the plot is that anybody who looked at that Cat trade when it was made in late September would say that Julius Randle is a rental. If they didn't say that, then they don't understand the salary cap. They don't understand what you don't move Cat if you don't think Nas can step right in. They are not seeing this as, if any, the timeline with Cat and Randle doesn't change. And if you're extending Randle, the money gets less. The timeline with Nas does go back and does rejuvenate. It does fulfill Tim Connolly's stated goal many, many times that I don't want a temporary winner. I want a chronic competitor. I want a chronic contender for the postseason. And that's what he's been able to deliver thus far. And so what we're seeing now is we're coming closer and closer to that reckoning. And the playoffs are between that time and now. And so we're going to learn a lot about Julius Randle, Chris Finch, and the rest of the Timberwolves team as we move forward.
Yeah, just how much of that lassitude, which I'm not even exactly sure. Lassitude.
Yeah.
Is a lot. Or how prevalent is it from Randle and Edwards, during the playoff series, and what is Finch's
response to it? Right.
Yeah. How much latitude does he give the lassitude?
There you go. Now you're hopping.
A player who doesn't have that is Jaylen Clark. You wrote about that in your and one newsletter portion of your weekly writing. I mean, I feel like I've done a bunch of if we don't see any more Jaylen Clark for the rest of the year, let's remember that. I think we're beyond that. He's in, he's earned it. He's a part of this thing. And I mean, it's in the ways we've been talking about. I don't know if you and I have individually have talked about it that much, but just it's because a lot of other pieces on the team do not have that same consistency as Jaylen Clark does, maybe in part because they have extremely different roles. Jaylen Clark has probably an easier role to be consistent in, but what's been the value of that?
The value is that Jaylen Clark understands exactly who he is and what he has to do to be good. That sounds simple, but it is not. If you come out of college programs, anybody who's made the NBA has been this is not a new thought. This has been, other people have said this many times, but the NBA is learning how high you rise. And once you've risen to that, all the good stuff, then how do you supplement yourself to be valuable in ways that you didn't expect you would have to be valuable?
Yeah.
The beauty of Jaylen Clark is he's never had any illusions from what he has always said, I am going to be indispensable on defense, and I am not going to hurt you on offense. And that is perfect for this team. And he has done it so well that, I mean, the N1 content that I put in there, some of it relates to the fact that he said he shot 11% from 3-point range as a freshman, and without any work from anybody else, just his own little going into the gym, he got it up to 31%. And then he said, well, if I get some help, if I get some actual coaching, I might work out. But he never has any illusions. And so he's now shooting, 40. He's over 40%. He has the best 3-point percentage on the team because his shot selection is so superb. And if you ask him, why does Chris Finch think you make winning plays? He goes, because I don't turn the ball over and because I stay in front of my man. I mean, like the ABCs of JV basketball,
Well, it's the ABCs of what Finch talks about after every single loss of what they haven't had, and so it makes sense that this two-way player out of nowhere that does all the things that drive Finch nuts that the other guys in the rotation are not consistently doing, he does. So yeah, he's earned it. He's in. Finch, I think it's like Finch is like, look, like I know you guys, like he can't really dribble. But he is playing and helping our team because he is doing X, Y, and Z, and we're not asking him to do any other letters in the alphabet.
If a team will ignore him because they see that he can't dribble, and that's why he almost never has the ball. So then they figure, all right. And we also see his shot mechanics. They are long and deliberate. He is not a natural shooter. So we don't really have to guard him. Well, except when he's wide open from three and has those times to take his time and make it, or when he's totally ignored and cuts to the basket and everybody is shocked that he's wide open underneath the hoop. He knows what to do. And guess what? If you've double teamed Ant and therefore no one is within 100 miles of him, he'll come over, get the ball, and instead of immediately giving it back, he will dribble into some foreign area so that somebody has to guard him. Meanwhile, the other man is cleared, and he just makes the simple pass to further the offense. That's what he does. And when you ask him, like I asked him in this thing that gets quoted in the N1, you do some subtle things like when you're on the perimeter and you wait for, like when you and Nas have the ball back and forth, you wait for him to clear his defenders. So the crowd, the double team aspect of that can't be done. And he goes, well, some of that is just because I know, I can't shoot. Other people have, because I haven't been able to shoot, this is my natural way of doing things. And so it is just somebody who was humble. And then if you turn around though and say, do you meaningfully, Chris Hines said this in the interview that also gets part of, do you deliberately try to create excitement when you go into the game? It goes, no, it's what I love to do. It's the funner part of the game. And it's just like, and things slow down for me. When I hear the crowd cheering and everything, it feels like the game is in slow motion. And he's talking about disrupting people on defense. And somebody who doesn't turn the ball over, who is constantly going to stay with their man, who is so fundamentally sound at it that he can guard large power forwards. In fact, has become a guy that is, when Randle or someone else has to sit, many times he is the backup power forward. And that is because he's fundamentally sound. It isn't because, how many times have you seen him get run over? I mean, we've seen him just get bowled over. And sometimes he gets the charge, and sometimes he picks himself up and goes like this with his hands to the refs, but he's going to be back doing it again. And all I can say is that guy is a piece of coal who compressed himself into a diamond. I mean, he is, if you don't love Jaylen Clark, you haven't listened to him enough or watched him enough, because he's one of the best, most open interviews. I mean, during that thing that I had to kind of edit out, but there was this one point where he's busy talking and Nas is right next to him, and Nas had just gotten some food and was just gulping it down, and Jaylen Clark looks over at him and goes, "Hey, is that good, bro?" It's it's like, they're really starving that down. And then Nikhil comes over in the middle of doing the interview, and Jaylen Clark
that's my
suddenly
son.
wraps his arms like, this is my son. He's a junior. And Nikhil just shakes his head and walks away.
They walked away. Oh, that was so funny.
I mean, it's like, on the one hand, he's like this ultra humble guy. On the other hand, he gives people shit all over the place. It's in a very beautiful kind of goodwill way. I mean, if they don't sign that guy to like a long-term contract, they're fools, is all I got to say. Because he's not going to change, and he's going to always be this good unless his body breaks down.
I was reading a Hollinger piece last week or something like that, and he was talking about a lot of the guy. There's a lot of guys who at this time of year turn from two ways into real contracts, and just as a refresher of what happened with Jaylen Clark is the Wolves ripped up his two-way contract for this season, gave him a real NBA minimum contract for the rest of this season. And then they have him on a guaranteed contract for next season at the minimum. And then a year after that, he becomes a restricted free agent. Awesome contract. But what Hollinger was pointing out in his piece is a lot of the other guys who signed off of a two-way into a standard NBA contract, what they did was they signed a guaranteed minimum for the rest of this season. And then next season was an option on it so that the player could then in the summer have the option be turned down and go turn into a bigger contract the following season. Now that's relevant to the Wolves that Jaylen's going to be making $2 million next year. Those other guys in the league who have had these things converted this summer are going to opt out of that year and then go get $7-8 million, whatever. They're going to get some sort of raise there. So I was
like, set the template for that. Naz Reid.
Yeah, right. That's true.
I mean, Jaylen Clark is following the Naz Reid path.
Yep, he is. I just was looking this up while you're talking about Jaylen Clark. I said estimated plus minus is my favorite advanced like catch-all metric of it. Right. Jaylen Clark's 97th percentile in estimated plus minus this season, and I'll put it up on the screen too. But it's just what I like about it is it's like the type of rankings that you go, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like the names make sense. So you're the other guys who are 97th percentile this season. Draymond Green, who is the favorite to win defensive player of the year. Scotty Barnes is 97th percentile. Marcus Smart hasn't played that much.
Right.
No, there's Jaylen Clark.
But is a guy who always contributes, gives of himself. These are self-sacrificers. That is what
Isaiah Hartenstein is another self-sacrificer. He's 97th percentile. And then Jaylen Clark is the other one right there. I mean, it's
look at that. That is a list of superior role players.
Yep.
That's what that is right there.
Yep. And
Draymond being probably like the most notorious role player / star.
Yeah. Which isn't even a derogatory thing,
Not at all.
In today's NBA, particularly when you're playing next to a Steph Curry or an Anthony Edwards or an Isaiah Hartenstein's case, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander.
Right.
What more? What more do you need out of that?
Right.
Let's grab one more break here. Let people know that we would love it if you went over and checked out Falling Knife Brewing Company this weekend. I know Britt and I, you can also just buy Falling Knife beer at the liquor store. Go find it over in the craft beer section.
I do it all the time.
Yeah. I mean, it's, if you're looking for to bring, a little 4-pack of something home to have in your fridge. I mean, it's just what both of us have. We're spending our own money. We're going to buy this. Like these are the beers that me and Britt actually buy. Obviously Falling Knife does a good job of taking care of us too when we're there in the tap room. But it's just for me and Britt, like literally the beer that we buy and put in our fridge. So that's always an option. We're always telling you about go there, watch the games and do that. Of course, for the Suns game on Friday, you can go to the tap room and watch that game. And then on Sunday, they play the Pistons at 6, a little bit earlier. If you want to get there early, they're doing a lot of trivia right now. 5 p.m. Disney Channel movie trivia at 5 p.m. on Sunday before the game starts at 6. But Falling Knife, longtime sponsor of the pod. We're grateful for them. Love it if you went and checked out the tap room if you haven't for one of these games. But also just always keep in mind the option of just being able to go and buy their beer as well from the liquor store. we love it. Today's show is also. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to say that, I don't buy Falling Knife exclusively because I like to shop around. I like to try different breweries' taste, but they are the most consistent brewery I buy. And it is easier to do now. I'm in full plug mode now, just being honest. You can find them a lot more easily than you used to be able to. It used to be that there were like 2 or 3 liquor stores I knew about. And they still are in places like the Dakota and some of these other. I had a Falling Knife at a restaurant in St. Paul recently, but they are in most of the liquor stores now. And Verbal Tick, you can see it's a very specifically decorated can, but it is. I gotta say, it's it's the most consistently satisfying beer I have.
Yeah, Verbal Tip's my go-to, and particularly in the summertime. Hazy IPA, like out on the patio, love it. Today's show is also brought to you by Your Home Improvement Company. We know spring is coming, and you probably have some home improvement projects that you need to work on. Your Home Improvement Company, again, another longtime sponsor that we've been telling you about. If you have windows that are leaky, you want to get addressed. That's their deal they have going on at the beginning of this year. Buy 2 get 2 free, or just 50% off the package of triple pane windows that you purchase. Or maybe the bathroom you've been holding off on getting that taken care of over the course of the winter. A little bit warmer, have them come in there, take care of it in as quick as a day. 30% off deal on bathroom remodels as well right now. It could be a simple shower to tub conversion or a whole bathroom renovation. Those are all 30% off. Your Home Improvement Company does also offer great financing deals that require 0 money down, 0 interest, and 0 payment until 2026. If you're thinking about it, hey, we've got something we know we want to work on at our home, we'd love it if you contacted Your Home Improvement Company by calling 866-777-YHIC, or you can go to yourhomeimprovementco.com. Your Home Improvement Company, where it's your home made better. Britt, the last thing I just would like to talk about a little bit here is these 2 games this weekend. I think this is interesting. 2 teams that have relevant games just for themselves, right? Phoenix is, fighting to keep themselves in the play-in here. As you mentioned earlier, they're playing a lot better. I've watched a few of their games this week. I think they got crushed last night. I didn't watch that one, but we've been seeing more consistently that version of like, oh yeah, this Phoenix team can beat a lot of different teams in the league. And then Detroit as well is they're fighting for their seeding in the Western Conference. I wrote down in my notes, I was like, Phoenix is interesting because they're playing a lot better of late. They could be a play-in matchup, but also because they're an offensive test, right? The Wolves handle that test well typically. And the Detroit's interesting on the other side of the ball, where you watch them play and you go, doesn't seem like that much potent offense here, but it's physical, it's tough. They'll be an interesting test because, again, they're a good team, solid team that is fighting for position, but also tough to score on, a tough physical group in that way. So I think it is I think it does present a weekend here where it is possible to get some real momentum if you're the Wolves by taking care of 2 teams who have different types of positives to them, and getting yourself a little bit back on track as you kind of come into the last, 2.5 weeks of the season after this weekend. Where do you just add on that?
Well, I think they match up really well with Phoenix. Obviously I think they're 3-0 against Phoenix thus far. And they did not. What's funny is they're now, I think that makes it 7 straight or 6 straight, whatever it is, because they swept them in the playoffs. But before that, if you recall, Phoenix had won 3 or 4 in the regular season, and
the Phoenix swept the series last year before
that's
the
what
playoffs.
it was 4-0. Okay,
it might have been 3, but it was a sweep.
Booker and Durant have not had like really, really fantastic games. They still get, those guys are going to get between 25 and 30 most nights, but the devastation they leave on a team has not happened to the Wolves very much this season. Sure. I think the Wolves have defensed them pretty well in that respect. I think that The subsidiary players, certainly Beal and Grayson Allen, have not hurt. I think they've been able to handle that offensive test with Phoenix.
Sure.
And I expect, you would think after losing 3 or 4 and things are starting to get, kind of dicey for the Wolves, in terms of what's happening now. They're at home. They've had a lot of time off, a rest advantage game. They should win that game. Detroit, Dame got hurt, and there's an opportunity to go to the 5th seed. And the 5th seed means you don't play the Knicks, you play Indiana. Now, I don't know, but I do think
they're already ahead of them right now.
They're already ahead. All right, so and they're only a game behind. Oh my goodness! Oh no, they're 3. Yeah, no, they are. They're a game and a half behind Indiana. So being able to host the playoff game, boy, I did not realize the Bucks had.
Did you realize they have the exact same record as the Wolves, the Pistons? 41 and 32. Yeah,
and that's JB Bickerstaff, man. Also, I can't remember who the GM is. I'm always failing that.
Langdon, right? Yeah,
getting the dude Tobias Harris and getting Hardaway from Dallas and getting Beasley in particular, and then even like that rookie Holland has started to play really well. But it started as kind of like a fixation because I was kind of pushing back against people who saying, the Wolves that pick will wind up being a second rounder, they'll never confer. And and Bickerstaff is a guy, I don't, love him for the local angle as much as I love the fact that he's hung tough in some really uncomfortable situations. He got scapegoated, I think, in Cleveland, although the emergence of Cleveland under their coach Atkinson would indicate that he didn't. But nevertheless, what he's done with Detroit, changed the attitude about them, is enabled Cade Cunningham, despite leading the NBA in turnovers, to be himself. Having that kind of patience as a coach, I think, is really important. Letting the guy figure it out for himself. Cade Cunningham has a ton of usage, but he is learning the game, and you can always pull back on that if you surround him with better talent going forward, or if the talent around him continues to improve, or if he just himself begins to learn to cut down on turnovers. But that is a team that is a dangerous team. It's funny you say they're the same record as the Wolves. They are the kind of team that might do things in the playoffs,
right?
That you would not expect, because what do they got to lose? They're playing with found money this year, and they have, they're already in 5th, which means they already are going to play not one of the top 3 in the East. And if they can host, then they are, in business. And so, and then you have a situation where Bickerstaff plays the second round, against Cleveland. That would be interesting, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Again, just for both of these teams, go back to like an expectation of effort in it being a good game. I think particularly with Detroit, like that's been their thing, right?
That's gonna be a fun game.
Yeah, it really is. I watched them play the Spurs.
Spurs have suddenly turned it around a little bit.
But the Pistons just smoked them. And it was without Cade.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking, because it had been something I looked up. I'm like, man, they had the same record as the Wolves, whatever. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna watch this Pistons Spurs game.
Right.
And it's like the exact game that the Wolves have, kind of like it's halftime, you're down 51-52 or whatever. Score of that game at halftime was no Cade, remember. Pistons 60, Spurs 34. There is a consistent, like they do lack talent. You will watch that Pistons Wolves game and you will go, there's clearly one team has more talent here. But there's a consistency to their
and they've unlocked Durant to some extent. He's really had a solidifying season. He had the season that everybody expected out of Mark Williams.
I like that.
And I think same draft and same kind of classic big, but he has fit in well. Bickerstaff has done a great job. Beasley off the bench is always, the guy is meant to be a sixth or seventh man gunner. That's what he lives for. Give me the green light, send me into the game, and with 4 minutes left to go in the first quarter or 5 minutes to go in the second quarter or whatever, and just let me cook. He just lets them
rip. Yeah. So it's going to be that's going to be, two fun ones. And I think it's going to be two of those games where if you get more of the apathetic effort or aesthetically apathetic effort from the Wolves. Yeah. I think by both teams, just because, again, I guess I could look this up here. Last night, the Suns got punked by the Celtics, but I wouldn't look just at that. Like, look at them beating the Cavs last weekend. I watched that game, was really impressive. They beat the Bucks on Monday. I think there's no Lillard in that game, but there was Giannis. And but yeah, so it just would be interesting setup for this weekend, which is really like the preamble of where is this team going to be after this weekend when there's only 7 games left in the season in the standings.
5 of them on the road.
Yeah, it's a tough road trip coming up. The easy time is kind of past here, but the way we're looking at it,
2 home games, and then they have 2 easy home games at the end of the year. I think it's Brooklyn and the Jazz.
Jazz, I believe.
Yeah, Jazz and Brooklyn. That's that's about as easy as it gets. Now we know that means nothing when it comes to
for this team. Reality of the situation right now is the Wolves have 32 losses and they're in the 8th seed. Golden State has 31 losses and is in the 7th seed. The Clippers won last night.
Big game.
Yeah. Did you watch that one? That one that was the one I was watching.
Harden.
Yeah. They came back late there. They're at 31 losses as well. And then above that, it's seemingly out of reach.
It's a separation. Memphis, right.
Yeah. Denver, LA, and Denver and the Lakers both won last night. I think they kind of needed to lose there to keep open the possibility that one of those teams that have 28 losses, Denver, LA, and Memphis, could fall down. But it's really,
it would take a collapse and a sweep by the Wolves. I mean, it would. I actually think 6 through 8 is really where it is, and I don't see the Kings and the Suns. They're what do we have? 5.5 games there. To 9 and 10. 5.5 was with 9 to play. That's really hard. So you're looking 6, 7, 8. You're looking at already being guaranteed a playoff series, or hosting, or going on the road for the first play-in game. And if you win that, going against the 2 seed. And if you lose that, having to win a game to play the Thunder. So there are stakes everywhere, and there are levels everywhere that are pretty clear. And so that is why it was so disheartening to see the last 4 games. And I think the Pacers are, my esteem for Rick Carlisle has grown even more. I always thought he was a good coach. I now call him a very good coach because of what he did that first meeting, and then what they turned around and did again with better personnel. And I will tell you, that is a textbook for any postseason scout looking at the Wolves. Run, hit the boards.
Yep.
Have your bigs shoot from the corners if they can. I mean, there is
drive and kick. Yeah.
It's concerning if you're a Timberwolves fan how formulaic they took apart the Wolves. They had no talent in the first meeting and just beat them with hustle and strategy. And the second game, they had talent and beat them with hustle and strategy.
I do think, and I just would lump like the Clippers and Warriors themselves individually into that same bucket that we were talking about at the top of this, of like, if you are the team that still has legitimate illusions of being the team who can sneak up on people, I do think if you fall to 7 or 8 for either the Clippers or the Warriors or the Wolves, like, it really, to me, really crushes the odds of that. Not because I think Houston, if they're the 2, is a significantly harder matchup than Denver at the 3 or easier, whatever. Like, I just think that the happenstance of needing to play in the play-in without having the time off.
The rest is crucial, right?
Yeah. So I think for all 3 teams, and I do think whichever of those 3 teams gets to the 6, Clippers, Warriors, or Wolves, like, look out for them. I don't know if they're favored, but like, that's real. That is it'll be one of those 3-6 series that can and should have pundits picking both sides of it. So it's still a battle. It's still a battle for that. And I mean, it's frustrating that the Wolves are here at 8 with 9 in the 8th seed with 9 to go, but they have 32 losses, and the Clippers have 31 and the Warriors have 31, and they both have one more game to play. Like, it is still possible to get this 6th seed. You just got to wake up this weekend and beat them.
The Clippers have a tough schedule. Tougher than I think than the Warriors or the Wolves. And I think the Wolves, even with a lot of their quote unquote easy games out of this, the road or home hasn't made that much difference to Minnesota. So playing on the road doesn't necessarily mean anything. No. I do think the Suns and the Pistons are both winnable games. And if this team is serious about a 6 seed, they got to sweep the weekend.
That's all I'm saying. Yeah. Because also I'm looking at now, while the Wolves are playing the Suns on Friday at home, the Clippers are playing Brooklyn, and Golden State's playing New Orleans. You know, so they're just you kind of do just need to at least survive still, even if you're not getting that, we won and we're moving up sort of deal here. But it's big weekend here. I think in many ways, to me, a last push at having a legitimate chance to do something in the playoffs by earning that 6th seed. And I'm really curious to see, as we were talking about with Randle, like, can I, on Saturday morning when Kyle and I are doing a pod, can we have the conversation about, hey, this was another one of those games where Randle's coming off of a really rough one, and he came back and he delivered in a very different way on Friday night against Phoenix. Ant too, how is this going to swing? Because if it feels, if Friday against Phoenix feels like these last 4 games have, then it's whatever belief is kind of remains in the fan base. I do think that's gonna dwindle, because Phoenix is one of those teams where we've just like chalked up to be like, yeah, that's the team. The Wolves have their number. Well, okay, like I agree with that. Like, got to beat them, and then on Tuesday you got Denver, who everyone's like, the Wolves have their number. Like, well, if they do, they got to beat them, And I think they do. I think they do. But there's a real stretch up here ahead. These 2 before the weekend, before you start that difficult 5-game road trip that includes Milwaukee and Memphis as well at the beginning of April. So we will see.
Defense. The Celtics, it's not surprising the Celtics destroyed them. They have the best wing defenders collection, in the league, probably.
Good point.
And, again, you contain Booker and Durant as much as you can. You keep them within between 20 and 30, and then they're not devastating. Yeah. Then you're going to beat, as long as Allen and Beal don't get free for 25 themselves, then you beat Phoenix. I mean, the formula for beating Phoenix is pretty easy, and that is a huge failing on Budenholzer and the rest of the roster, that they have not. They've made the formula for beating that team so simple, and it's taking away their best things. And they don't have a lot to offer beyond their best things. And so Detroit is another kettle of fish. Detroit is like, how do you beat them? Well, you make sure Beasley doesn't get off. Well, you don't really have any control over that. Beasley is either going to get 30 or he's going to get 13. And you hope it's the latter. Right. But he's a heat check. He always has been. And then, can you get Cade to make 8 turnovers instead of 4? That matters. Can you have Tobias Harris not be plus 20 at the end of the night because of all the little things he's doing? It really is this interesting, is Ron Holland, who's actually a real transition guy, real streaky, quick player. Does he hurt you because you're not getting back again?
Sure.
So it's great. It's great to be a basketball fan, because the games mean more. They count the same in the standings, but they mean more now because you know what's left and you know what margin of error you have. And the Wolves' margin of error for what you're talking about for the 6th seed is preciously thin.
Mm-hmm.
You know, their margin of error to land in 8th is pretty wide. You know, they can, you know, lose in the first play-in and make the second play-in and have the reward of playing OKC on the road. You know,
that's why this weekend, I think, is going to largely confirm or deny the reasons for optimism that I think we graciously laid out for the first
perfectly timed column.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we'll see. We'll see. Is prescient or right, stupid?
Right.
Well, to be determined.
Well, I mean, that's what I mean. At least it was presented at the right time.
Yes. That'll be up at MinPost. You guys can read that. I'm sure Britt will be tweeting that out as well. It is. I do think the having the conversation about reasons for optimism in the playoffs specifically is worthwhile with this team for what we laid out. There is a ceiling you can see to this team that oftentimes a team that's 41-32 sitting in the AC does not have.
Right.
They do need to, those things need to be woven together by Finch and through, you know, connectivity. But there are reasons to be optimistic with this team. I just think this weekend is going to be a test of whether or not those were immediate reasons to be optimistic, or maybe something further down.
And again, the reason I wrote the column is it's a backlash. And believe me, I mean, I've spent entire columns just ripping this team.
Mm-hmm.
But
I knew you weren't going to do that. I knew you were going to go. I knew you were going to be like too easy to come at Ant. Yep.
And but then also, what I want to say to fans who, if they fail, say, I knew it all along. They suck. I knew it. If they don't fail, say you're wrong. I want to see that too. Because, you know, I'll say I'm wrong all the time. I don't, in fact, it isn't that I like saying I'm wrong, but I like the process of saying I'm wrong because it puts me on record as needing to not be wrong next time about something like that. It makes me think differently. And I think that it's important for anybody who holds a position to be honest with yourself about how accurate you're seeing things. Because if you're not seeing things accurately, then you're just being a loudmouth, you know?
It is an easy team to be wrong about, I think. It just in some of their volatility of it. I mean, exactly. I've done 5-6 times
the gyrations of the, you know, my columns are just kind of fun. Oh, they've won 8 in a row. You know, I mean, I just basically, I did my own almost throw in the towel after they lost to the Wizards on the, you know, after 2 16-game losing streaks and a 41-point loss. They lost to that team. And that's when I just said, well, you know, I don't know, man. I may be checking out here. But that's what happens, you know. The Wolves will do this to you. If you're going to ride the waves, understand the times you get drowned and the times you hang 10.
Absolutely. He's Britt Robson. You guys can read that column over at MinPost, and you follow him on Twitter and Blue Sky, Britt Robson. Coming up next will be Kyle and I doing a podcast Saturday morning after Wolves Suns on Friday night. Till then, he's Britt. I'm Dane. Peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hot so you can find me in the crowd, yeah.